I'm Thinking of Ending Things is a 2020 film written and directed by Charlie Kaufman. At surface level, the story follows a young woman taking a road trip with her new boyfriend Jake to meet his parents. Through the duration of the film, the woman claims to be thinking of ending things, supposedly referring to her relationship. She admires Jake in many ways, but can't shake the feeling that there's something profoundly, unutterably, unfixably wrong here. The audience will feel the same way throughout the film. The whole experience is surreal and dreamlike, with strange and often unsettling inconsistencies at every turn. Jake's friendly demeanor turns as cold and bitter as the blizzard outside after the two arrive. His parents, however, are very erratic, oscillating between awkward and downright insane, and his girlfriend has no consistent outfit, personality, occupation, or even name. But there's something deeper at play here. We catch glimpses of an unnamed old man going about his life as the janitor of a high school, and several times in the movie the young woman receives a phone call, seemingly from herself. Every time, someone on the other end speaks this message.
There's only one question to resolve. I'm scared. I feel a little crazy. You're not lucid. The assumptions are right. I can feel my fear growing. Now is the time for the answer. Just one question to answer.
In his 1964 book, Understanding Media, The Extensions of Man, Marshall McLuhan proposed an intriguing idea, that the medium is the message. McLuhan's theory is essentially that the content in any piece of media is only a part of the larger whole. The medium surrounds it, acting as the vessel to communicate the content. The medium is the character with which the content is expressed. And because of that, the medium fundamentally changes how we perceive the content, playing the most significant role in what we will gain, consciously or not, from the experience. While this theory has vast implications for how we operate as a society, I'd like to review it on a smaller scale. So let's take a look at two different mediums, Charlie Kaufman's film I'm Thinking of Ending Things, and Eva HD's 2015 poem Bone Dog. Both of these pieces of media contain very similar content, but let's analyze the ways in which their mediums cause their messages to differ. The key to understanding I'm Thinking of Ending Things lies in the old janitor. His true identity is actually a much older version of Jake, and the entire story is from his perspective. In addition to that, Jake never really had any girlfriend. In fact, nothing we see of the young couple is real. It's all a fantasy created by Jake to distract him from his lonely day-to-day life. Toward the climax of the film, fake Jake and his fake girlfriend take a detour against her many objections to his old high school, actually the school where real Jake currently works. We get a very surreal and revealing exchange between the janitor and the young woman, a symbolic representation of Jake finally accepting the truth. He saw a complete stranger at a bar one night several years ago and never even talked to her. But she was the blank canvas that Jake used to paint what he thought an ideal relationship would look like. Jake's imagination, however, is far from perfect. The cognitive dissonance he uses to build up this world isn't enough to stop his insecurities from creeping in. Jake's parents seem to have good intentions, but they constantly bring up topics that embarrass him.
Jake used to paint tulip cards. He worked really hard at it.
He clumsily transitions to the next event in the story whenever the young woman mentions a topic he doesn't want to face.
Jake.
Here! Ta-da!
And he can't even bring himself to be the main character of his own fantasy. Jake has felt like a background character for much of his life, which has likely been the cause of, or possibly the consequence of, his self-esteem issues.
Jake tells me that he feels it. He feels invisible.
The film uses several faraway shots of Jake in empty parts of the school to show the isolation he feels on a daily basis. There is not one scene where he speaks to a real person. And because we see so little of him, it's nearly impossible to think of him as the main character on a first viewing. The audience is forced to push him to the side, neglecting his story to focus instead on the young woman's. On to our second piece of media, Eva HD's poem Bone Dog. Bone Dog starts with the idea that coming home is terrible. It considers this a fact, framing whatever previous location you might have been in with a sense of longing. The blame then shifts from your environment to you, illustrating that you don't seem to fit into this world anymore. The last few lines seem to paint a picture of old age by describing your clothes, effectively an extension of yourself, as slack in all the wrong spots, seamy, dish rag ratty, and worn. From there, Bone Dog doubles down on this feeling of exhaustion with words like etching deeper, parched well, and frail strand. Dragging your shoelaces loose evokes feelings of weary routine. The link to tomorrow being only a frail strand gives us the idea that it's getting harder to continue moving forward. It describes you sighing into the onslaught of identical days, evoking feelings of monotony and defeat. It makes a point to tell you that time is wearing you down. The ellipses and anyways portray a sense of general tiredness that brings with it an unwillingness to hold on to constructive thoughts. What do they matter anyway? The last stanza allows you to see through your reality with X-ray vision, revealing everything you see now, all of it, bone. The X-ray vision is like a loss of meaning. You no longer see the beauty of things for what they are, but rather the emptiness of those things and what they will never be. Bone Dog is packed with metaphor, forcing the reader to conceptualize images of sorrow, exhaustion, and flatness. Eva HD's use of second person draws the audience in, giving them the feeling that they themselves are trapped at the end of a long, tiresome life. The poem helps you along the way by painting a vivid representation of each melancholy thought. As a whole, it expresses a very specific kind of loneliness, the deep, aching kind that wells up inside of you and then spills out into your world as well, turning everything dull, dry, and white as bone. Bone Dog is straightforward with its goal, to encapsulate the feeling of lonely exhaustion that comes at the end of a monotonous life. I'm Thinking of Ending Things has nearly the exact same goal, but it hides its true intentions behind another storyline. It uses specific characters and experiences, making it hard to insert yourself into the narrative. You can empathize or relate to a character, but you'll never be that character. Meanwhile, the poem is vague and non-specific, allowing almost anyone to imagine themselves as the subject. Bone Dog pulls you into the feeling, while I'm Thinking of Ending Things pushes you away by keeping the main character off-screen for the majority of the film. In literature, the reader has the responsibility of bringing a world to life through their imagination. Since people's minds all work differently, it follows that literature is a more open-ended medium. No two people will imagine a story exactly the same. Differing personalities, ideals, biases, and beliefs all change how one interprets the written word, likely in turn affecting what they take away from it. But in film, everyone is looking at the same moving picture, and this vastly limits the range of direct interpretation one can make, but opens up new possibilities to indirect interpretation in the form of visual metaphor. Any metaphor in a book has to be at least alluded to in text, or the reader has no way of knowing it's there. But any change in lighting, color, cinematography, or visual structure can be done silently in a film. Cinema, therefore, can be a much more subjective medium than literature, despite giving a more consistent audience experience. So in this case, the medium used has a vast effect on both what the artist is capable of doing and what the audience is capable of perceiving. This begs the question, what would happen when multiple mediums are combined? Would the audience benefit from the strengths of both, or would one dilute the other, only emphasizing its weaknesses? Luckily, we have a perfect example right in front of us. The entirety of the poem Bone Dog is recited by the young woman within the film I'm Thinking of Ending Things. As you may have guessed by now, the name of this film doesn't just refer to the young woman thinking of ending her relationship. The story at its core is about an old man filled with regret and loneliness, contemplating suicide. In this light, his fantasy can be seen both as an escape and a fleeting attempt to find something to hold on to, some reason to keep going. After the conversation between real Jake and the young woman, he seems to come to terms with the fact that his fantasy is just that, a fantasy. But he cannot bear the reality of his current life. There is nowhere else for him to turn. So just before he puts the keys into the ignition of his car to begin the drive home, he stops, places them on his seat next to him, and waits. The final shot of the movie makes it clear that Jake succumbed to hypothermia inside his car. In a 1977 lecture, Marshall McLuhan explained a way in which different mediums change the way we operate and perceive the world as humans.
Reading is actually an activity of rapid guessing. Any word has so many meanings that to select one in a context of other words requires very rapid guessing. That's why a good reader tends to be a very quick decision maker. The very nature of reading calls for quick decisions and guessing.
In this sense, the way we consume information matters much more than the information itself. And this could very well apply to Jake. Much of I'm Thinking of Ending Things contains allusions or depictions of existing media, all from within his mind. Jake is constantly consuming media to fill the lonely silences in his life. The first real time we see him, he's watching the 1959 show Mr. Peabody and Sherman on a small television over breakfast. Then, he's driving to work listening to religious programming on the radio. At school, he stops cleaning to view a rehearsal of the 1943 musical Oklahoma before getting a cold look from the singer, and later he watches a fictional movie supposedly directed by Robert Zemeckis. And these are only throughout one day. The rest of the movie is still absolutely packed with references to media. William Wordsworth's 1804 poem Ode, Intimations of Immortality from Recollections of Early Childhood, Andrew Wyeth's 1948 painting Christina's World, Anna Kavan's 1967 novel Ice, David Foster Wallace's 1997 book of essays A Supposedly Fun Thing I'll Never Do Again, Guy Debord's 1967 book The Society of the Spectacle, Frank Lesser's controversial 1936 song Baby It's Cold Outside. Jake's girlfriend takes the credit for several other pieces of media, Pauline Kael's 1974 review of A Woman Under the Influence, Ralph Albert Blakelock's late 1800s landscape paintings, and of course, Eva H.D.'s 2015 poem, Bone Dog. While Jake is clearly knowledgeable in many subjects, he is not original. All of his ideas come parroted from the words of artists, scientists, and philosophers. Even the last vision he has before he dies is unoriginal. We see young Jake on stage, performing a speech seemingly to everyone he's known throughout his life. Him and all audience members are wearing makeup to appear old. This may be what Jake's mind has conjured up as a fake happy ending for him. In reality, the entire scene is just a recreation of the speech from the 2001 movie A Beautiful Mind, followed immediately by the performance of the song Lonely Room from Oklahoma. Jake does not know what a real happy ending looks like, so he steals the ideas from other stories instead. Earlier in the film, the young woman goes looking for Jake after the family mysteriously vanishes, and comes across Jake's childhood bedroom. Here we see the source of nearly all media references in the movie: Pauline Kael, William Wordsworth, David Foster Wallace, etc. She sees Eva H.D.'s book of poems open to a specific page, and is troubled to find that it contains Bone Dog, the poem she thought she wrote. It is evident now to us that Jake deeply relates to this poem. He even says he feels like it was written about him when his girlfriend recited it on the car ride there.
It's like you wrote it about me.
But nowhere is Jake's attachment to existing art and ideas more evident than in the basement scene. When the young woman descends into the basement that Jake clearly wanted her to stay out of, we are symbolically delving into his mind, finding the source of his inner thoughts. And what she finds is terrifying to her. The paintings she thought were hers were made by someone else. And unskilled, sloppy imitations lie on the basement floor, signed Jake. Immediately following this revelation is yet another unoriginal thought spoken by the woman, also terrifying in its subject matter and implications. It's tragic how few people possess their souls before they die. Nothing is more rare in any man, says Emerson, than an act of his own. And it's quite true. Most people are other people. Their thoughts are someone else's opinions, their lives a mimicry, their passions a quotation. That's an Oscar Wilde quote.
There's only one question to resolve. I'm scared. I feel a little crazy. I'm not lucid. The assumptions are right. I can feel my fear growing. Now is the time for the answer. Just one question. One question to answer.
So, is media affecting the way Jake thinks? His mindset is very pessimistic, but most media he consumes is analytical or philosophical, not based in any negativity. And we can't properly determine how much any medium has affected Jake because he knows too many. Musicals, books, poems, songs, essays, and movies provide several different experiences, and he is well versed in all of them, but stays narrow-minded when it comes to his own life. There seems to be no proper source for Jake's mindset because he doesn't see the world through the lens of only one medium. Or does he? The last idea of McLuhan's that I will touch on is that of recursion. He postulates that the content of any medium is always another medium. For example, on one level we have the poem Bone Dog as the content told through the medium of the young woman reciting it, but on a deeper level we have the lines in Bone Dog as the content within the medium of poetry. You'll see this effect everywhere if you start looking for it. But what if we try going in the opposite direction? What if we think of the many mediums within Jake's mind instead as pieces of content? Would it then be such a stretch to consider his imagination as a medium of its own? In Jake's childhood bedroom, we catch glimpses of old tapes that seem to be his memories. The shelves are lined with missed opportunities, unforgettable mishaps, futile efforts at success, and lost hope. These memories are a piece of the content within the medium of his mind, and they've had a deep, fundamental effect on him. He says it himself.
Everything is tinged, colored by mood, by emotion, by past experience. There is no objective reality.
In the end, the content in Jake's mind wasn't nearly as important as the medium, which was the mind itself, pruning these pieces of art for preconceived opinions and ideas. Jake felt trapped because the only messages that stuck in his mind were those which confirmed his already established beliefs. Maybe this is why he didn't make himself the main character. He wanted to see the world through someone else's eyes, a different medium to change the message. But it was all still a fantasy. The young woman was only more content molded by Jake's crumbling mind, so the dreaded message persisted. Over and over again, it took the form of a call to the young woman's phone. The assumptions are right. I can feel my fear growing. Now is the time for the answer. Just one question. One question to answer. And that question, at its core, was the question of whether to continue living. And since Jake was unready, unwilling, or unable to change his own mindset, he took the only other option available to him. Jake's grim fate is a warning to us. Recognize the consequences of a medium. If everything is content within a larger medium, everything is subjective. Subjectivity can be dangerous if it is accepted as fact. And there are layers of subjectivity everywhere. Right now, you are watching and interpreting an interpretation of the mindset of a man imagining a world that references countless other works by other humans, all within a film made by a person who based it off of a book made by another person who was undoubtedly inspired by countless other works himself. So remember that the human mind, however complex, is still a biased medium. Remember that the medium is the message. And remember that the world's larger than the inside of your own head.
You know? Perspective.